Welcome to Prairie Imperfection. My name is Lisa. Today I wanted to share with you my positive epidural story and my medicated births, because I had two of them. So, and as a bonus, I will share with you my second epidural story, which I haven't decided if that's positive or not yet. But, okay, for my first... Okay, actually, before I start, you might want to grab a coffee, because my births are long stories. I did not get those magical 3-hour labors. Mine are days long. This is going to involve a little bit about inductions as well, so I guess this is the medicated birth stories and my feelings about that. So, I chose to do inductions because my doctor recommended to be getting induced after 10 days past the due date, because he said at that point the placenta starts to disintegrate and it's a risk for the baby. So I trusted his professional opinion and went with that. Plus, if you have ever been 10 days overdue, like, I was ready for that baby to come out anyways, so I was happy to be getting the process going. And I originally actually was thinking I would not get an epidural for my first birth, but I ended up deciding to get one because my labor was so long. I think ultimately it was like exhaustion that pushed me to decide on epidural more than the pain. So, I was, 10 days overdue. I went in to start the induction process. They checked me. I had not whatsoever made any progress in dilating or anything, so they started me out with a Cervidex, which is a little tampon basically that they stick up the cervix to start the cervix dilating. Then, okay, so I went in there at 9 a.m. They, I think, finally did that at like 3 p.m. and it took, a couple hours for them to make sure it was working and stuff. And then they sent me home, and then they said, come back in the morning if you're going into labor, obviously, or if it falls out. So we got home, and about an hour later it fell out, so we were back at the hospital, and they checked me again, and then at that point they thought, I was dilated enough that I didn't need to redo the Cervidex, that I could go straight to the Pitocin, which is another form of induction, but through an IV drip. So they said as soon as another room opens up, we'll hook you up to the drip and start you going that way. So this was like, 10 o'clock at night. And we waited for another room to open up, though. The hospital that I was at is really busy. And I kept getting bumped by women coming in, way further along and progressing better in labor than me. So I waited all night, and then around 7 in the morning maybe, a room finally opened up. But as I waited that through the night, I wasn't able to sleep because my contractions were, painful enough that I couldn't sleep. But they were not doing anything to progress my labor. So by the time I got into that room and hooked up to the Pitocin drip, I was no further progressed along. They set me up to the drip. They kind of let that keep going for a bit. Then they checked me, I think, around noon, and they said I was about 4 centimeters, or three or 4 centimeters. And at that point, here comes my son. At that point, it was painful. I felt the labor was painful enough, and I wasn't progressing at all, and I was getting exhausted already because I had been up for, over 24 hours now. So I decided to get the epidural, and the nurse encouraged me to get the epidural at that point because she said sometimes when you're not progressing, if you get the epidural, it actually speeds up your labor because it kind of helps your body relax and work with itself. So I thought that would be good. So we got the epidural. So when they put in the epidural, they tell you to stay very still and do not move. And of course I had read previously, you know, all the things that could go wrong with epidural and all the side effects and stuff. So I was pretty nervous, but my husband was there like to help me, steady me to stay very still. But as soon as they put the epidural in, it shot like a cold sensation up my back. So it made me jump because I wasn't expecting that at all. But that was okay. Nothing crazy happened and it all worked well. And it was actually very effective. And I was able to sleep for the afternoon. And it did, I think, speed up my labor, which was awesome. So by the evening, you know, I had progressed to like an 8 or something. So yeah, by the time I was at 10 centimeters, I could feel like the pressure, and I could feel like my legs were shaking and my whole kind of like body was tense. You could feel the tenseness, just not the pain, which was awesome. So yeah. So then when I was ready to push, there was only like one doctor on call that night. So I had to wait like 2 hours for the doctor to come, which was actually kind of a blessing in disguise, because by the time she actually got in there and I had to start pushing, it only took me about 15 minutes of pushing to give birth to my daughter. I gave birth at around 11:30, something like that, at night on the Friday. So I went in Thursday morning around 9 a.m. and I gave birth Friday night around 11:30 p.m. So I was so thankful for the epidural that I was able to sleep a little bit Friday afternoon. Otherwise I would have been so exhausted. I don't think I would have made it. I think I probably would have passed out. I would totally recommend the epidural, and I did choose it again for my second birth. However, my second epidural story isn't as positive. I'll share that with you now too. So again, I went overdue. I was 10 days overdue with my second child, so they called me in to be induced. When I went in, they checked me. At that point, they said I was already, you know, dilated a few centimeters, so I didn't have to do the Cervidex, which is the tampon thing that they stick in your cervix. I could just go directly to the drip, which was called the Pitocin drip. Which is awesome, because you know what? That cuts down like, you know, a whole procedure and a big rigmarole. But I still had to wait for a room to open up, and like in my first story, the hospital is very busy, so I waited, I don't know, a while. Though I went in there maybe around noon, and I got into a delivery room to be hooked up to the Pitocin by like sometime in the evening, maybe 6, so it wasn't that long. It wasn't as long as the first birth anyways, which was awesome. But the stupid thing about this labor is they checked me, you know, at the beginning to see that I was slightly dilated. Then when they brought me in to get Pitocin, they never checked my cervix to see how far along I was progressing. They just hooked me up to the Pitocin, and then they never checked at all until far, far into the night. And, you know, the pain was getting pretty intense, so I was asking for an epidural, and they were kind of putting me off a little bit, and then finally I said, you know, like, I need it, and they said, okay, the anesthesiologist is in the next room. She'll come. After she's done with the one lady, she'll come and hook you up. So, yeah, by the time she actually came and hooked me up, I felt like so, like, the pain was so intense and so unbearable, I couldn't even, like, handle it anymore. So, yeah. I guess, like, the procedure of putting in the epidural went good. It took a while for it to actually kick in this time, but once it kicked in, I couldn't feel anything. It was a relief, and yeah, I was mostly just relieved that I could, you know, breathe a little bit. But they finally checked my cervix, like, after they put in the epidural, and then at that point they realized I was 8 centimeters already. So I kind of feel like, you know, it was too little too late at that point. If I would have known I was 8 centimeters before that epidural was put in, I don't know if I would have decided to go with it, because at that point, you know, I'm almost done. Plus, then by the time I was 10 centimeters and ready to push, I couldn't feel anything. So I kind of waited for me to get feeling back so the pushing would be easier. But that never happened, and my baby started to go into distress. So they, you know, decided, okay, we got to push now. So they had to kind of guide me through the pushing stage because I still couldn't feel a thing. So yeah, then I gave birth to my son. I think I gave birth to my son around like 3 in the morning. So I went in there, I think around noon. I don't even know what days these were. Noon the day before, and gave birth like at 3 a.m. the next day. So that was, you know, way shorter actually than my first birth. So yeah, those are my 2 birth stories. The one thing about induction, I think if I have a baby in the future, I would love it if I could try to have one without being induced at all, because I feel like maybe the Pitocin makes the contractions more painful. Though, you know, I have never experienced natural labor without, you know, help. So I would like to. But if you have, let me know. If you have experienced both, is there a difference in pain, or is it the same? Because yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. And yeah, for epidurals, I definitely would recommend it. It helps a lot with the pain, and one thing that my doctors told me before I gave birth, he said, you know, don't be afraid of the medicine, because, you know, we live in a time where we are lucky enough to have this, and it's here to help mothers. It's not, you know, it's here to help us. So why don't we use it? And I thought that was kind of true. So I took advantage of the times that we live in, and it made my labor more tolerable and yeah, less traumatic, I guess. So that is my stories, my birth stories. I hope you enjoyed them. I will see you in the next video. Bye.